Ever feel like you're seeing the world through like a smudged window? Like you're trying to make sense of things, but there's this like hazy filter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You're not alone.
Yeah.
That's exactly how the ancient Toltecs felt. And Domingo Ruiz uses their wisdom to help us like wipe that grime away.
Yeah.
In his book, The Four Agreements.
What's so fascinating is the Toltecs had this metaphor for that smudged window feeling.
Okay.
The smoky mirror. Imagine trying to see your reflection in a mirror clouded with smoke. You might catch glimpses of yourself, but it wouldn't be the full picture, right?
So what they're saying is we're all walking around with these smoky mirrors inside us, distorting how we see ourselves in the world.
Precisely. And what clouds our mirrors? Well, Ruiz says it's the belief systems we've absorbed from our cultures, our families, even the media. He calls this process domestication. Think of it like this. Remember when you were a kid and maybe you wanted to wear your favorite superhero costume everywhere, even to the grocery store?
Oh yeah, definitely had that phase.
Right. But somewhere along the way, you learned that wasn't acceptable according to society's rules. You were domesticated into a certain way of behaving.
Okay, so we're all domesticated to some degree, but how does that tie back to those like limiting beliefs we're trying to break free from?
Because that domestication process, it creates our own personal book of law. We internalize these rules and judgments, often unconsciously, and they become our guideposts for navigating the world. But here's the thing. What if some of those rules are actually holding us back? What if they're based on fear or outdated expectations or someone else's idea of who we should be?
So we're essentially trapped by our own internal rule book. I'm starting to see where those four agreements come in, like tools to rewrite the rules right.
You got it. They're like a guide to identifying those outdated rules, hitting the delete button, and consciously choosing new ones that serve us better.
And the first agreement, be impeccable with your word. That's like choosing the ink for our rewrite right.
Absolutely. Ruiz reminds us that words have incredible power. They can uplift or tear down, create harmony, or incite chaos. Think of it this way. Imagine you're planting a garden in your mind. What are you choosing to plant with your words? Seeds of doubt or seeds of confidence?
That's such a powerful image. And it makes you realize how often we might be unconsciously planting those doubt seeds with negative self-talk or careless remarks to others.
Exactly. Being impeccable with our words means being mindful of their impact both on ourselves and on others.
And here's where things get really interesting for me personally. Agreement number 2, don't take anything personally. It's like easier said than done right.
It's definitely a tough one, especially for us natural empaths out there. But Ruiz argues that when we take things personally, we're actually falling for an illusion. Remember the smoky mirror?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. We're letting that smoke cloud our judgment.
Exactly, because most of the time, other people's actions or words say more about them than they do about us. Their bad mood, their harsh words, they often stem from their own internal battles, their own book of law, filled with limiting beliefs.
You know, it's funny you say that because I was recently dealing with a situation where a colleague was being really critical of a project I was working on, and I let it get to me. I took it super personally. But later I found out he was going through a really tough time outside of work. It wasn't really about the project at all.
It rarely is, right? And that's what's so freeing about this agreement. When we can detach from that need to take things personally, we stop carrying around the weight of other people's emotional baggage. We free ourselves up to respond with more compassion and understanding.
We've cleaned our smoky mirrors, we're being mindful of the seeds we're planting with our words, and we're not taking on other people's stuff. What's next on this journey of rewriting our internal rule books?
Well, the third agreement addresses a trap we all fall into. Don't make assumptions. We often jump to conclusions, fill in the blanks with our own insecurities, and end up creating unnecessary drama.
Oh my gosh. I am so guilty of this. My brain loves to come up with worst-case scenarios.
It's a human tendency. But Ruiz encourages us to challenge those assumptions, to ask questions, to communicate clearly. Because often the stories we create in our heads are far more dramatic than the reality of the situation.
It's like we're always trying to read each other's minds instead of just, talking to each other.
Exactly. And that lack of communication can be the root of so many misunderstandings in our relationships. But when we choose to communicate openly and honestly, we create space for more trust, more intimacy, and ultimately more fulfilling connections.
Okay, this is resonating on a deep level. So no more assuming, no more mind reading. Let's talk about that final agreement. Always do your best. What does best even look like in this context? It feels like best can be so subjective. Like, some days my best is just getting out of bed and making coffee.
Exactly. And Ruiz acknowledges that he's not talking about pushing ourselves to exhaustion or comparing ourselves to some impossible standard. It's about showing up authentically with self-compassion and giving whatever you've got in that moment.
So it's about effort over perfection.
Right.
Because honestly, trying to be perfect all the time, that's just setting ourselves up for disappointment.
You nailed it. Always do your best. Is about releasing that pressure valve of perfectionism. It's about recognizing that our best will fluctuate depending on our energy levels, our circumstances, all sorts of factors. Some days your best might be a monumental effort. Other days it might feel more like coasting. And both are okay.
It's about being present with where we are on that particular day and honoring that.
Right. Absolutely. And here's the really cool thing about this agreement. When you combine it with the other three, it becomes a recipe for living with more freedom and inner peace. Think about it. You're being mindful of your words. You're not taking on other people's emotional baggage. You're not getting lost in assumptions, and you're consistently striving to do your best. That's a powerful way to move through the world.
It's like Ruiz is handing us this toolbox for dismantling the smoky mirror within us and creating a new, clearer reflection.
Precisely. And he doesn't leave us hanging with just the tools. He gives us a blueprint for the renovation project with the concept of the dream of the second attention.
This is the part where things got really thought-provoking for me. Can you break down what that means for someone like me who's just dipping their toes into Toltec wisdom?
Absolutely. Think of it this way. We're all living in a dream, but not the kind you have when you're asleep. This is the dream of our waking lives, shaped by those ingrained beliefs and agreements we've been talking about. But Ruiz says we have the power to wake up within that dream, to become conscious creators of our reality. That's the second attention.
So it's like we're upgrading from autopilot to manual mode, taking the wheel and steering our lives in a more intentional direction.
Exactly. And the four agreements become our navigation system, helping us stay on course towards the dream we want to create for ourselves.
It's empowering to know we're not just passive passengers on this journey. We have agency.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. Ruiz uses this vivid metaphor of a parasite to describe the forces that try to keep us stuck in those old limiting patterns. He's talking about the inner critic, the voice of self-doubt that feeds off negativity.
So how do we evict this parasite? Because let's be real, it can feel pretty comfortable in its negativity sometimes.
It can, can't it? But remember, comfort isn't always growth. Ruiz suggests several strategies for starving the parasite. One is to simply stop feeding it with negative self-talk. Another is to confront those fears head-on, one by one, like slaying a many-headed monster.
And he also talks about symbolic death as a powerful tool for transformation, right? I have to admit the one threw me for a loop at first.
It's definitely the most radical concept, but think of it this way. It's not about literally dying, but rather about letting go of the old limited version of yourself, the one ruled by fear and negativity. So a new, more authentic self can emerge, like a snake shedding its skin.
So it's like a conscious uncoupling from the beliefs, habits, even relationships that are no longer serving us.
That's a great way to put it. It's about making space for the person you're becoming, even as you're letting go of the person you used to be.
Wow, the four agreements, they're really like a roadmap for a whole life transformation, aren't they? It's not just about reading the book, it's about embodying these principles.
Exactly. It's about taking Ruiz's wisdom and weaving it into the tapestry of your life, thread by thread, choice by choice.
It's a journey, not a destination, right? And like any journey, there will be detours, wrong turns, maybe even a few flat tires along the way. But as long as we keep coming back to those four agreements, to those core principles, we're always heading in the right direction.
Beautifully said. And remember, you don't have to navigate this journey alone. Ruiz's work reminds us that we're all connected, all on this path of growth and evolution together.
So as you move through your day, remember the power of those four agreements. Be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. Because you deserve to live a life free from the illusions of your smoky mirror, a life that reflects the brightest, most authentic version of yourself.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this exploration of ideas. Keep those questions coming, and we'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking your own truth.
With love and light, let's forge ahead together. I love you all. Please think about this until next time.